Three parts in the site of Capernaum. Everything is in ruins, let me say, unless the new church, which is in service, and I guess now it's closed because there is a mass inside. So the first part is the church, modern church, that is built on the house of Peter, and we'll see beneath the old churches and the old house of Peter. To the left hand we have the synagogue from the 5th century that was built in the exact spot of the first century synagogue, the one that Jesus was coming to, preaching and praying in it. And the third part is the outside museum. It is a little bit similar to the one we have seen yesterday in Caesarea, if you remember, but here it's more organized because less space, and we have only capitals coming from the synagogue. And I'm always interested with this capital. I don't know what you can see to the right side of the capital. Connie, what can you see? You're filming, I know, but what can you see on the capital?
Well, I see, is it the temple or?
Is it the temple? Is it the temple, my friends? Yes. And I'm talking about this capital. If I'm not mistaken, that you Capernaum, the cross point of nations. I don't remember exactly where it is located and what is the text exactly. And later Jesus did how do you say, not to bless, opposite to bless, curse the city and the other two cities surrounding, which were Chorazin, Capernaum, and numbers are still deep inside. It will come to float later, don't worry. So, yes, Capernaum was a border city between two regions, the region of Herod Philip, the son of Herod the Great, and Herod Antipas. You see, and before that, everything was in the hands of Romans. So from one region to the other, people were paying taxes. But Capernaum was a small town. And in this small town, as I said, Jesus had chosen 5 apostles. One of them is Peter. I finished with Matthew, now I'm back to Peter. But is Peter, or was Peter from Capernaum itself? Where he came from? Bethsaida, and this is the third village, Bethsaida, Chorazin, and Capernaum, that they were cursed by Jesus. He was from Bethsaida. Bethsaida is a village a little bit more to the north on the side of the Jordan River, before it comes inside the Sea of Galilee. Okay? So, as he was a fisherman, it is more reasonable to find more fish in the Sea of Galilee, in the lake, not on the river itself, which is smaller. So he came here, and here he met his wife. He loved her. She loved him. They got married, and he lived with his mother-in-law. And the house that is known as the House of Peter was really the house of his mother-in-law. And it was located here inside the building. And what you can see, there are the restorations of the different churches from Byzantine time, and again at the octagonal building. And the house was inside. We can see some stones, restored stones for sure, inside. And what happened that the first Jewish Christian community, the Jewish Christians, did venerate the house of Peter as they did with the house of Mary in Nazareth, and they began to pray in it. And this first community tried to buy the houses next to the house of Peter, and the restoration, if you will notice, you can see outside the walls some walls as well between the two churches. The inner wall is the first church of the 4th century, and the second wall is the 5th century church, and the third wall is the outside wall of the church. But between the two walls inside, you have smaller walls. These were the houses of neighbors of the house of Peter, where the first Christian community was buying to expand the house of Peter to have enough space. And this church was built recently in the year 1990 only, and it was built on the octagonal building as well, octagonal shape as well, but also on the shape of a ship, or two ships in each other. One is heading in the south, north-south, and one is heading east-west. And also this makes a cross. But the main shape is octagonal, and the ship, as St. Peter was a fisherman. And on the other side, you can see the remains of old houses of the village that they were restored. And know that this location, Capernaum, is belonging to the Catholic Church, the Franciscans, since they bought it in 1922. And they were themselves who did the archaeological work by a priest who was called Corbo. And after he was dead, this priest did ask to be buried here. And if you look beneath the church to the left, you can see his tomb over there. Father Corbo. He did dig in many sites, and this was his major site religion. You can see this sign that is showing the shape of the church and explaining a little bit about it, but unfortunately with my eyes I cannot read. Please have a look on the shape of the synagogue, and I would like to ask you to notice that it was made of two levels, two floors. This one and upper floor. How I know that there was an upper floor? Not because of the presentation. For sure that the presentation helped me and also my studies. But according to archaeology, I can notice a door. I know that this facade was redone by the Franciscans. An upper door. And who was staying at the upper level? Sorry?
High priest.
High priest. Bishops? Never. No. His place was in the middle. It was your place.
Oh, I got to be way up.
It was your place because in synagogues, women should be separated out of men. Yeah, and they should be hidden, not to be seen by men. Why? Because during the service of the synagogue, there should be, I guess, the whole
distraction.
life, exactly, distraction. So men could be distracted by women. So not to concentrate on God's words, Bible, Torah, Tanakh. So women were in a hidden place that they were not seen by men. And men were sitting on both sides, and it's not the high priest who called it a bad. By the way, the priests were known in Judaism only in the temple. At the time of Jesus, they were priests. Okay. But when the temple was destroyed, what did disappear in Judaism? The priesthood and the sacrifices. And the priests were offering the sacrifice to God. And in Christianity, we see that Jesus was the last sacrifice, and the priest who did offer the sacrifice, and he was the last ever sacrifice. So there's no need anymore for sacrifices. And nowadays we have some Christians, for example, after some accidents or for another reason, they buy some sheep or some any kind of animal, they slaughter it and give it for the poor as a protection from God. That in Christianity it is not right, because the last sacrifice, or the real sacrifice, is Christ with his death on the cross. Anyhow, friends, please, did you notice that the main entrance was from there?
The what?
The main entrance was from there. It's towards the south. And Jerusalem is to the south of the synagogue. And where do Jews pray? Towards which direction? No, in Christianity to east, yeah, which is not a real law but referred to the direction of Jerusalem, so to the south. And in our churches we have the altars that we are heading towards to pray, and usually they are towards the east. But in Judaism they have the scrolls of the Torah, and they should be towards the south here. But we have the gate. Something wrong here. Something wrong. Not exactly. Not exactly. Do you remember the carving on the capital we have seen, the Ark of Covenant? It might be used here. The scrolls of the Torah were put in the same shape as the Ark of Covenant, with something that you can move and put it anywhere you want, as it happened in the before the temple construction period. Why? Because here the synagogues in Galilee moved their directions, or moved their doors, indeed, not directions, towards the south, towards Jerusalem, because the temple is already destroyed and the Jews were kicked out of Jerusalem.
Doesn't matter. We're all here. Doesn't have to be
Good morning, guys. You want some Israeli dance?
Yes.
Yourself? Hava Nagila. Let's go big Two snap fishes here. Lots I don't know, but there are still fishes, and there are seasons of fishing. Not the whole year long for sure. It's limited by the state, I guess. Also think that today we'll have the St. Peter fish. You know why we call this fish by St. Peter? Why we don't call it by other names, St. Mark for example? Well, just Mark, but St. Peter. Do you know why we call it St. Peter fish? I don't know. He gets a royalty. 2, 10, 3, and 4. Let's do it. 5, 3. Second step. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The middle. Okay. Oh, after that jump. Okay.
more than 8,000 feet high, and the Dead Sea is 1,200 feet below the sea level. You see the difference? That's why it's called Yarden Yuret. We will be driving south later, and we won't see the Jordan River from the street. It's always a military zone. Why? Because it's a border area. And I remember the site that we wanted to visit 10 years ago, it was not accessible for visits because of the military area, because of the border. But after discovering the real site in Jordan and to have a kind of competition, they opened the Israeli site for tourists, only a small area, but large enough for groups to visit and to pray if they want to as well. I don't remember how long it is really, frankly, but I can check again. Now we are to the south of the Sea of Galilee. You can see kind of a bridge here, the bridge for the cars, but also a kind of bridge to with the dam. Sorry, with the dam. Bridge with the dam to stop the water cooling down, going down whenever there's a low level of the Sea of Galilee. But as you did notice, the level is quite good, high enough, and they let the water go through the Jordan River. But know that this water is not reaching the Dead Sea, unfortunately. It's not reaching the Dead Sea because the water is taken some areas more to the south, and we might have some small quantity, maybe 4%, that is left that is reaching the Dead Sea. And that is why the Dead Sea is shrinking every year. It's shrinking about 3 feet deeper. See, if the situation continues this way, I guess in 100 years we won't have the Dead Sea anymore. We won't have the Dead Sea. From the Israeli sides, we have some valleys. Whenever it's raining, the water goes through these valleys and goes through Jordan River. And in the Jordanian side as well. But again, this happens only during the raining days. Maybe 1 day, 2 days a week, with about, let me say, 20 weeks of, not 20 weeks, even less. Let me say 15 weeks multiplied by 2, and 30 days that you have running water in these valleys going with the river. So it's nothing. Here I can see that the level is high enough here. We have read in many languages outside the text of the Bible, of the Gospel, which was baptized. Again, that it did not happen here, but this side was done by the Israelis to give the opportunity for tourists and believers to come to the water, touch it, and pray in it. And for sure now, you can pray as others. And Reverend General told me that we are going to have a small ceremony about baptism. So I'll leave you the time. Take the time you need. We're not that in a hurry. Unless I prefer to come back home early. But never mind. So take your time. Temptation. Jesus, I don't remember, it was before or after baptism.
After baptism, the Holy Spirit drove him
took
into
him in the Judean desert. Where to exactly we don't know. And he remained for 40 days without eating. And he was tempted by the devil, Satan. And what was the temptation? The first temptation, do you remember?
bread. Turning bread into...
Turning the stones into bread to eat.
I meant stones into bread.
And in the Catholic Church for a long time, one of the Sunday Gospels that we read is this temptation. What was the second temptation? Do you remember?
Depends what gospel you're reading.
You're right. You're right. I guess upon Luke, it's if he is throwing himself from the temple and the angels of God will hold him. What was the third temptation?
Power.
If he was worshiping the devil,
Yeah.
and he will get all kingdoms. Friends, you remember this morning at Mount of Beatitudes? What did I say? I said Oriental mentality, our way of thinking. What could be the kingdoms of the earth for an Oriental? Maybe for you, you might think about Russia, about Europe as kingdoms of the ground. For us Orientals, as our country is small, once you are up, you have a very panoramic, large view. These are the kingdoms of the earth. And because of the sight, or because of the scene, this place was chosen by the tradition that here where the site, or here where the three temptations took place on this mountain. So it's not sure that it happened really here, but doesn't matter. As I said this morning, doesn't matter. What means more is what happened. And remember the three answers of Jesus, and the three answers were always from the book of Deuteronomy.
Right.
Not only by bread that lives the man,
Right.
but by the words of God.
Right.
Second answer, don't put your God in temptation. Third answer was, it's only for God that you worship. Always book of temptation. Book of Deuteronomy, sorry. But really archaeological proof there was not. But since the Byzantine time, there was a construction, and mainly there were monks living here in the desert, a little bit far away from the city. And they were living in the caves that you can see next. And the monks built the church. Sorry, my throat is dry, that's why I'm coughing a little bit, that's all. No corona, don't worry. So they built the monastery as a part of their law to gather on Sundays and late Saturdays for the Holy Mass, and also for a good meal all together. But the second day, the next day, Monday morning, everyone was going to his cave for his time of silence and time of prayer and time of work, if he was able to work. Okay? So, according to the tradition, this is the mountain of temptation, where Jesus was tempted 3 times by the devil. Now,